Yes, talk about SPRC, another low float minute runner. This has ran multiple times over the past month or whatever, and I was kind of late to this trade. It's actually another pre-market pop. Does another, this pattern can do just another high day swipe, but it usually has to tap out right away, then roll back over, which is what it was doing. A lot of people in my Discord room hit this. It was really, really, really good reads for them. But I missed this trade and man, it's in this kind of like deeper pullback. This is a full dollar pullback. Don't want to chase down here, but I was just watching the book, and one thing I noticed is that the book is you'll notice you'll learn about, unless you were in with a good average over here, you'll learn that by reading low floats, especially in a pre-market where things can get easily manipulated 10-20% in a candle, one green candle could be 10-20%. You really want to have orders on the ask to the upside that you can risk, right? And you really don't want your average, right? You don't want to be chasing in the low eights if the next ask stack is at 850, 840, 850, right? You're just because not only can this get broken, and then there's even more empty space at the upside. So you want to take shorts on these bounces, especially these really aggressive bounces, into into ask that you can clearly see with minimal bid follow up, right? So, we get our high day clear out, we get our pullback. This is right here, pullback, and here's the bounce. And we start noticing on the bounce, one really nice thing about Bookmap is, for me, if I miss this trade, I'd be like, all right, maybe they swipe 8.5s and I can get in, with an 8.55, 8.6 average, and maybe just does one of these long fake outs and fades. I would wait for stuff like that. But what's really, really great about Bookmap is that you can see where the resistance is actually going to be, and you could form a different thesis based on where the rigger is actually putting, or whoever is putting offers on the ask. So now you actually have defined levels. Say hey, I know that these levels have to get broken, and you can see if bids are following up or not following it up, right? So that's why on these little pushes, like here this is Central Time, so 8:14, on this push right on this candle right here, we get a little push. No bids following it up really, except for this $8 level, and then one of the bearish things you really want to see is you want to see these bounces, and then you love to see a level get tested, a pullback with, you love to see new ask get stacked. See how this wasn't there before and now it's there now? You love to see new offers come in after big pushes with minimal bid follow up. And then it's even nicer when you have more offers even above it. So now you have a double resistance level that you can use as risk if you decide to take that play. And then, yeah, I was just watching this and I noticed they start throwing up some bids, and then the ass starts to get pulled. I was like, oh man, are they, because there's always types of games like this, right? Sometimes you don't get the immediate, crack that you're expecting. Sometimes bids come in and more manipulation happens, and you ultimately have to make it, that's why even if you say you took this short into these bids up, you want your average in the 830s up here, right? Because at least even if they pull this, you have this level you can risk. Or you could see how this level gets tested. Sometimes it gets broken by a few cents and then pulls back down. You could do stuff like that. It's a judgment call, really. But I actually kind of like this. This I thought this play was really interesting. This is the type of stuff we see in low floats, right? I went over this on my video yesterday on BCDA, which isn't a low float, but it's the same concept where you get these deep pullbacks with these instant bounces. And the thing about these deep pullbacks and these reclaims is, retail's very bullish reclaims. If they see support get swiped, here's $8 getting swiped with an instant 30-cent push, this is almost instant. Imagine the ask sitting at 797 and then 3 seconds later it's at 820, right? It's it just, it looks like it's going straight up. And then just a few bids here and there, but look at this. it pushes, you get your big retail push, it pulls back, and then a new ask comes in. And that's really, especially after a very extreme type of move like this. And by the way, this would have been right here. Pull, swipe down $8. Here's the push. A new ask comes in, rolls over because, there's really no actual volume. That's the only bid, which means if this bid gets broken, there's no bids until probably $half, and even down there's really not a lot. But 750 $half. That's why when this bid gets taken out and rolls over, you just get an instant 50-cent crack on what's essentially no selling because there's no actual bids on this thing. But believe it or not, even though I saw this and I saw this happen, I didn't make the trade because I think I was a little concerned about this bid, even though there was nothing below it. Kind of should have anticipated it, but the trade I did make was this trade. You had this extremely high volume. This was almost the highest volume candle of the day compared to the push. You had this high volume VWAP reclaim, and the thing about these like high volume Vwap reclaims is retails longs are taught it's very bullish, right? When Vwap gets reclaimed and a ton of volume comes into the stock, it's usually seen as a very very bullish thing. But and here's where I did make a bookmap read. Where before, if I saw this push, I would have wanted to see like a pullback, and I would have wanted to see these lower highs get tested, right? I would have wanted to see like 840s or something like that. Like, oh, let me see them swipe every single lower high, fake out below high day, then pull it, right? Which can be a good pattern if that happened. But what does the book tell us on this push? So here's this VWAP reclaim, right? Big volume comes in, right? People are gonna think it's really strong. What's the first thing I see? First of all, I don't see a lot of bids. Sometimes there's bids initially. These bids kind of serve to push the stock up. So like bids here, bids here, bids here. Like, and sometimes these bids could be like they'll put like 20k, 20k, 20. These weren't that big, but sometimes they are that big. And then once it gets to the level they want, they pull the bids, right? So I'm seeing a minimal bid support. I'm seeing $8. I see a bunch of orders at 798, 799, 8, 801. I see a big push, right? So temporarily, all these offers got eaten into. It pulls back, and I see even more offers at get restacked. And not only that, I see new offers up here at 806. So now I'm seeing $8 get restacked. I'm seeing new offers coming at 806. And I'm seeing a lack of bids, right? So I'm like, all right, let me throw some offers in the 790s. We're going to try to get filled in the 790s, right? On these pushes, below where the ask is. I want to make sure I get filled. Throw some offers in the sevens, high 790s, mid high 790s, getting filled. Also, this wasn't SSR, so shorting a little bit into the bid. And ultimately, I was just looking at, 806 and up higher. I'm noticing like 820s has some, 840s has some. So I was like thinking like, all right, like maybe I'll put my risk somewhere up in near like 830. I had about a 30-cent risk on this because I'm like, well, it has to at least eat through all this. And I'm just noticing no bids following this up. I'm noticing all these pushes are getting they're taking out the ask, but there's no additional follow through. That's also bearish. And then after this one didn't go, and I saw the ask start getting moved down, right? And then over here moved down and moved down. I'm like, okay, this trade is working. But since my average wasn't, my average was down here. High day is more than 10% away, and usually I don't like that. I don't like when my average is too far away from high day, especially on a potentially super rigged ticker. So I was already making some covers in the low sevens, kind of take some off for a 10% win, keeping my risk really tight, and then I just waited for market open, and I got an instant dump, which was amazing. Like I was like great, like $8 didn't even get retested. The volume wasn't super impressive. It came back down. I actually took the rest of my profits off, even though I should have waited for sub 6, but I took the rest of it off near the 1 minute 200 here. And I was like, oh, cool. That was a nice little like 20% plus fade. I did take some profits on this pullback, in case I wanted to do, in case I did some crazy market open stuff. But I took the rest off because my average wasn't amazing. I told my Discord room, I was like, yeah, if my average was up here, then I, would have been fine trying to hold this for a deeper fade. But um, just like I talk about in my videos, a lot of these quick pullbacks create a lot of empty space on the book. And even if a stock isn't super strong and lacks liquidity, a lot of times, this is classic thin manipulation where they attack this empty space on the book, right? Between there's pretty much no orders between like 6.5 and 7.2s, and that's why you start getting very low flow action like this. So this was actually really interesting. Um, and me and a couple people in my room traded this, right? So how do you trade this? It's incredibly hard to predict because what happened here was it was at 6.5. It fake up halted at like 710 and then instantly dumped. You would have had to been crazy fast to get that. But we didn't get that. You never chase. And the reason why you never chase is because, again, on these quick pullbacks, here's a quick pullback, there's a lot of empty space. Market maker can rig the stock, throw some bids at the bottom and rig a stock straight up. Now, I actually didn't think this was going to squeeze to like new highs because the volume wasn't there, right? In the right context, if you get a clear out with a 10% dump to support and they start throwing up bids, you could long this and you could get insane short squeezes risking these bid. You can enter into 630s risking, 610s or $6, and you could get like $1, $2, $3 squeezes out of this thing. But I just think this didn't have the liquidity. This just looked like a low volume. See, very low soak volume. Very, very, very low soak volume often implies they don't have enough liquidity to actually do a big squeeze. So what's common is, it's very common, is you get a bunch of higher lows, right? You get a bunch of super low volume soaking that can last 1 hour, 2 hours. Sometimes I think it lasts 3, 4 hours. But it lasts usually at least an hour, if not more. And then you get some type of backside move. It comes back down and cracks, right? So low volume soaking, higher lows, backside move, comes back down to the higher lows, and then eventually cracks the higher lows, right? This is common backside structure. But we actually took a trade specifically on this candle. A bunch of people shorted this candle, right? Why? Well, again, same with my CMMB video I just made. These quick reclaims, if this is going to squeeze, these reclaims often have to instantly go. If these don't instantly go, then and does these like low volume pullbacks, like here's your little classic little like retail pattern, right? Right, you got like your low volume pullback, you got higher lows, and you got your initiation. Like these become potential long traps. So like let's look at what the book did, right? First of all, what do you notice? There's no bids following this up, right? There's like minimal bids, and then there ends up being one guy at 6.6 here, right? So this was at 11.16, so let's go there. And then, so I noticed this one bid show up. I'm like, all right, there's like one bidder, but it's really not a whole lot below that guy. And isn't this funny, right? So right before the retail push, which is here, right before this push, I noticed the ask starts to get thicker. I noticed they put even more. Again, this is all before the push. They put even more above that ask, and they pulled the bid. They pulled. So like now there's besides this one little guy up here, which ended up that also this guy actually ended up following this up, getting filled, and then it like. But besides this one guy, this is just all empty space, and really it's empty space down to here. So I saw this push. I knew 709, 710, 711 had a bunch of ask on it. That guy got filled, stalling. Actually started shorting right in the sevens around here. Especially because that bid being pulled and this new guy up here, I was pretty convinced that was a good enough entry. I was like, I'll just short into these asks. Because in my mind, I'm like, I want to get my average as close to these asks as possible, right? That way, if it gets broken, I at least have a good average up to this ask, and sometimes this gets broken and gets pulled, or maybe this one breaks too and it gets pulled. Like there's a bunch of little things that can happen, but I just like my average to be as close to these guys as possible, right? So because sometimes stuff like this happens where like a few of the offers get eaten into, but ultimately it doesn't. This 710 level, which ended up being this flat top level, doesn't even get broken. So if you're waiting for a 710 crack that never comes, like the book could tell you, the book shows you. Like you can see these bubbles in real time, and you can see the lack of bid support. And you could just make decisions based on where all these offers are being stacked, right? So um, I shorted 7, it instantly worked, and then the only thing I said on my Discord, I was like, hey, um, there's still a bunch of higher lows. I was telling the guys, I'm like, there's still a bunch of higher lows here. Like, the thing about really thin plays, and we saw this on TNON. I'll go. So TNON is a perfect example of this. Um, these thin, super thin volume kind of support structures can take a while to crack. They can take multiple hours. Like you unless like you instantly get a big dump candle, which sometimes happens, but usually on thinner plays, support will just hold with no volume for like it could be hours, it could be 2 hours, it could be 3 hours. But especially after like a very backside move like this, um, I'm always convinced that this $6 hold number, these higher lows are all going to get cracked, um, and you're going to have a chance to cover. One big thing I'll say about this is on these really thin zero volume support cracks. Like this was zero volume for like 2 hours before this crack. A lot of these cracks, if you see this crack is only 75k. There's only 75k shares. A lot of these super thin cracks often don't have follow through. The follow through is very minimal because of the lack of participation in the stock. It's just like there's not a lot of people who are bagged and looking to sell anymore. It's more or less just a support swipe, really thin support swipe, and then you know, and then the order book's so thin they just they buy a few thousand shares and they start propping it back up. So a lot of times, like you actually want on a lot of fades, you actually want more volume. More volume often implies more people are bagged, there's more participation, there's potentially more room to the downside. Um, so I'll show up TNON um, from what was it this day? This was the same thing where you had a higher low zero volume support structure, right? And as a short seller, you're holding. You're like, man, this thing's so thin. It's just choppy. You get the move you want. Sometimes you get lucky, you get another low, right? And then the volume disappears. The order book's really thin. They just manip it back up. And then in this case, it actually did an after hours, move. And we all know how TNON, played out in the end. I'm not saying that's going to happen on SPRC. I would say if there's any ticker out there that has potential to do some after hours push above, 710 or even 750, it's probably SPRC. Or it might just be it might just gap down tomorrow. Who knows? But one of the main lessons there is these super thin volume support cracks just don't have a lot of follow through. Especially these zero volume ones, and you often have to cover kind of aggressively, unless you're thinking swing short potential and stuff like that. So yeah, so nice, interesting little book map. A lot of ask stacking up here. A lot of ask on this Vwap high volume Vwap reclaims. By the way, I mean, I just did a video on CMMB. Here's a high volume Vwap reclaim, but CMMB. I mean, I made a video on this, so you just go watch it. But just to show what I mean, CMMB broke $1 and had a bunch of bids. If we zoom out, here's the Vwap reclaim with bid, more bids, and then it pulls back. They stack even more bids, empty order book to the upside, bids to the downside, and high day squeeze, right? This is an example of a bullish Vwap reclaim. This is like what every retail long expects to happen when you get a high volume Vwap reclaim. Expect new highs. but this had bids following it up, right? And these had walk downs into those bids with empty space to the upside, right? And then SPRC was the exact opposite. You have high volume Vwap reclaim, no bids following it up, and there's a bunch of ass being stacked. There's a bunch of ass stacks. So it's a very similar pattern, but with very different books. And you can use the book to make decisions on whether this situation is bullish or bearish. Before, when I would trade these, I would have to guess. I would just have to guess. I would just have to guess, like, hey, do I think this is bullish or bearish? And I used to, my win rate used to be a lot lower before using it, but now I could just see, if the bids are following it up, what the pullback's looking like, how many offers are stacked up higher, and I can form a much more accurate thesis about what might happen. So, anyways, SPRC, interesting play. So I shorted this pop, and then I covered on the thin crack. So, pretty interesting one. And that's about it. More information down below. I'm on my Discord, by the way. So, have a good one, guys. See ya.